Hi, my name is Shane Barnowski, and these are my answers to the Stravinsky questions for the Rite of Spring. So, for the first question about the story, it's told in two parts. The first part is called The Kiss of the Earth, and it starts off with these games or ritual dances that these women are just kind of dancing around, and then all of a sudden these sages come in to interrupt their dancing, and then they end that part by singing their praise or dancing to the god of spring. In the second part, it's a little bit darker. It's called the sacrifice. It's at night, and the women are now secretly dancing. Um, and eventually one of the ladies that are dancing is chosen to become a sacrifice to the god of the spring, and eventually the the ballet ends with her dancing to her death. This is a little bit different than what you would say you would find in like a Tchaikovsky ballet, because I think the stories are both very magical, but for Tchaikovsky, it's a little bit more lighthearted. When I think Tchaikovsky and his kind of style, I think of the Nutcracker, which is very light, very playful. Um, but when I think of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, it's more rugged, it's more angular, it's more forward thinking, I would say, where he's trying to utilize newer techniques rather than use a standard technique, both with the choreography that's being used and also just the music. When I was looking for other performances, it was a little bit difficult to find ones that were, I guess, different, but I finally found one that was an all-male performance. The biggest difference between this and the performance that we were given was that you couldn't really understand what the story was. One, they weren't really wearing any costumes. It was more just like almost just like a skin tight jumpsuit of some sort. But it's really hard to get the story from this performance because, again, it's all males. You can get the idea of what's happening, but it's kind of just difficult of thinking of who are the characters, who is portraying what. And what I really like about the performance that we were given was that they were in like a full uniform, and there was a diversity in men and women. And I think another thing that I liked with using men and women rather than just men with the men, it's more mechanical almost. It's almost like they were performing like robots, and the movement was less fluid than I think if you had both the men and the women, which is kind of weird because in Rite of Spring the movement itself is not very fluid. It's more angular. It's very rhythmic, I would say, as a lack of a better term to describe it. In comparison to Firebird, I would say the stories behind them are very similar. I would say Rite of Spring is a little bit more darker. You still see forms of just like classic ballet in Firebird, in my opinion, whereas with Rite of Spring, it's not really what people would describe as ballet. They would, if we were in the time of Firebird and Rite of Spring, Firebird would probably be more of a modern piece of work, whereas Rite of Spring would be considered new music or forward-thinking music, where it was basically breaking the norm for ballet. As far as like instrumentation or anything like that, it's still fairly the same. You can see Stravinsky's style in both how there's a lot of soloistic playing, and you're getting a lot of weird textures rather than finite melodies in these two pieces, especially in the Rite of Spring, where in the beginning you can pick out the Rite of Spring. You can pick out the bassoon solo that you can hear throughout, but there are all these different just effects. Is what I would say is what everything else is doing. It's not really typical music playing. How people are they're utilizing extended techniques almost, but I just think that with Rite of Spring you see more. It's more technique based rather than music based, I guess is kind of what I'm going at. It's more you're showing off what things your instrument can do, rather than just the typical I can push down a button and a note comes out. As far as portraying the ballets, Firebird does it by utilizing, I would say, melodies. And whenever a certain melody or a certain mood change, a certain character would come forward. Where for Rite of Spring, it's more like the music is guiding what the dancers are doing. So that's why I think that the Rite of Spring is very much rhythmic, because they're almost like cues for the dancers to do a certain move, or almost like a metronome for their stomping. And it's in an interview, it was said that it was the music that was portraying the scene that was supposed to be given, not the dancers portraying what the music was supposed to be given. So I think the in Rite of Spring you see a lot of angular, very non-conventional dancing, which goes very well with Stravinsky's compositions, or with the with paired with the instruments, because the instruments are not doing normal things. They are doing, like I said, they're doing unconventional. They're making effects with their instruments rather than just like simple melodies or like counter melodies, that kind of thing. Do I believe if this is revolutionary or evolutionary? I would say both. As most of us know, this was not, the Rite of Spring was not taken very well. There was a gigantic riot at the very first performance, and basically people who paid a lot of money to see this very new piece that they were very excited about, they saw how the dancers were dancing, and it wasn't what they expected. They almost thought that they were being mocked, because all they saw were these dancers just stomping around, rather than the more majestic feeling of what ballet was during that time. And as far as evolutionary, I think what Stravinsky did pushed what composers and choreographers thought they could do with ballet. That ballet didn't have to be this one type of dancing where it was flowing, it was majestic, it was they could push the boundaries of what they considered to be ballet. They still had people who were ballet trained, but as far as the moves that they would do, they became more angular. It became more less conventional. as people were used to. And finally, I would say knowing the history behind this piece is a must, because if you play this as if you were playing for like a Tchaikovsky ballet, it's not going to sound like what Stravinsky had in mind. It's just going to sound. It's not going to have that edge that it typically, or that it should have. It's not going to have that little bit of energy that it really needs to really be the performance that Stravinsky was going for with the Rite of Spring. It needs to be, every single note needs to have determination with it. It needs to have energy. It needs to still have flow to it, but it needs to seem like just very rugged. And you still need to play with a very good sound, but you need to almost get into a different character. Then it's kind of like going from playing classical music into a new music kind of setting. You just really have to change your mind, and knowing, that this was not accepted when it first came out, knowing that it is supposed to be rugged and it's supposed to be angular, will help a performer perform it better to the just better towards what Stravinsky had envisioned it to be played. And those are my answers. Thank you.